Good morning and welcome to Meet a Missioner Monday. It looks like my background has fallen down. Forgive me for that. Welcome, and we are so glad that you are here. Today, I first want to wish you a belated Juneteenth, a belated Father's Day, and a belated summer solstice. We've had much to celebrate this weekend. We also want to acknowledge that for many of these are heavy holidays. There are challenges that come with them. And so, for all of you, we hold you in our thoughts and our prayers as we move into this week. We also celebrated on Saturday World Refugee Day. And for many of you, you have probably been with us throughout this past week. We've been trying to follow the pastoral theological reflection framework of examining different issues. We started last Monday with C, hearing from lay missioner Heidi Sternecka as she shared about her experiences working as an immigration attorney on the US-Mexico border. On Wednesday, we moved into Judge, taking that all to prayer with the Maryknoll Society Church Engagement Division and praying for refugees. And then on Friday, we heard from the Maryknoll Office of Global Concerns as they shared how we can be advocates and how we can stand up for refugees in this time, and also when we go to vote come November. If you are interested in any of those pieces of the program, you might have missed them last week. We're putting those in the comments, so please check them out after our Meet a Missioner Monday today. Today, I am delighted to welcome Dee Dungy, who is a lay missioner serving with the Jesuit Refugee Services in Nairobi, Kenya. She's the regional advocacy officer there, and she has previously served in Cambodia as a lay missioner. I was thrilled to be with her when I was also in Cambodia. She's a graduate of Indiana University and came to Maryknoll from Florida, where she was very involved with St. Vincent de Paul. So welcome, Dee. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Karen.
So for those of you that are just tuning in, you may notice if you've been to Meet a Missioner Monday before, our framework looks a little different today. Dee's bandwidth is somewhat limited where she is in Nairobi, so we're only going to be able to hear her. She has put together all sorts of great slides for us, and so we'll get to look at those, but you'll just hear Dee's voice. As always, though, if you have any questions for her, please drop those in the comments as we go forward. Now, Dee, I will turn it over to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for the introduction. And good morning to all, or good evening. I'm Dee Dungy, a Maryknoll lay missioner. I'm working with the Jesuit Refugee Services, JRS, as the advocacy coordinator in East Africa region, which encompasses 4 countries: Uganda, South Sudan, Ethiopia, and Kenya. As the advocacy coordinator, I work on behalf of refugees, IDPs, asylum seekers, and with a varied class of migrants in the refugee camps, as well as in the resettlement area and with urban refugees. I will give a brief definition on the different classes of migrations in a bit. East Africa is referred to as a mixed migration flow pattern. And what that means, there are complex populations movements in and through and around the regions. The complexity of the population embodies refugees, asylum seekers, economic and environmental migrants, unaccompanied minors, smugglers, victims of human trafficking, and stranded persons. The view of the map depicts the complexity makeup of the refugees. The vast of migrants flow comes from South Sudan to Uganda. So I just want to go over a couple of definitions while you read this. Refugees are recognized under the 1951 Refugee Convention. IDPs, internally displaced persons, is someone who is forced to flee their home but remains within country borders. They do not fall within the legal definition of a refugee. There is no convention for IDPs equivalent to the 1951 Refugee Convention, albeit there's international laws that protect persons from displacement. An asylum seeker is someone seeking international protection and sanctions but whose claim for refugee status has not been determined. Take a look at the geospatial map. This map reflects the flow of migrants from year 2000 to 2015. Each dot represents 7 refugees on the move. There are 4 migratory routes through the 4 regions in which I work. Of course, north, east, west, and south. The heavy flow of refugees are coming from the Horn of Africa. And the Horn of Africa are the states, the countries Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia, and Djibouti. So what's causing people to leave their country of origin? This term is called the push factor. Push factors represented here are for the countries of each country, For Somalia, the push factors why people are leaving, for example, is conflict, poverty, and chronic insecurity. Ethiopia, you see, is socioeconomic factors, ethnic tensions, environmental factors. South Sudan, conflict, economic factors, a lack of infrastructure, and Sudan, conflict and economic factors. Kenya, economic factors, and Uganda, demographic, economic factors, and environmental factors. There is a refugee crisis, as we all know, but the top reasons, if you have to combine them throughout the countries, the top reasons for movement or displacement is due to political tension, conflict, natural disasters, poverty, lack of social economic, especially in countries with a high youth population, which is Eritreans and Somalians.
Dee, this is amazing to help really sort of ground in that area of where it is you're working. And I know I didn't necessarily understand all those different factors that were contributing across that region. I just want to let folks know, if you are tuning in, we're listening today to Dee Dungy, who is a Marine Lay missioner who is serving in Nairobi, Kenya with the Jesuit Refugee Services. And she's talking a bit about her work today. If you do have any questions, as I'm sure a lot of what she's sharing might be new to some of us, please put those in the comments. The comment box is either below this video on your device, I'm not sure what you're watching on, or it's over to the right. So any questions you have, please share those. Sorry, Dee, didn't mean to interrupt you. Continue. This is fascinating.
That's quite all right. So estimately 320,000 Somalians have fled to Ethiopia, Kenya, and Djibouti. And UNHCR reports that at least 1/2 of Somalian children are malnutrition. And the cases of girls and women report high occurrences of sexual abuse, sexual assault, and rape have been reported along the journey. Okay, so let me move the conversation on. Hopefully you have a better understanding of the context of the region. And now I'd like to share about advocacy issues. Why do women migrate? Women and men cite the same common factors of migration. Insecurities, lack of rights, limited economic opportunity. However, women are more likely to indicate family reasons. Men do not open up that much, but women leave. Main drivers for leaving would be due to early marriages, community mediation of violence, and clan control, and for FGMs, the female genital mutilation. So in our programs, I want to I want to share the emotive journeys of women in their own voices. Like the one in the blue. This is a young lady from Somalia that left her country in January 2020. It took her 2 months to reach the reception center in Kakuma, which is one of the camps in Kenya. And she says, before migrating, I felt anger, sadness, because of the insecurity and harassment, suffered from hunger, no clothes, fear as my sister fell into a grave, walking over dead bodies. Another one reads, insecurity and violence, I fear, and it became more severe with the information of perpetrators of my father's killing are around. Fearful as 2 persons threatened me in the reception. Some tried to abuse me because of my physical disability. Worried because my younger brothers disappeared, still not found. It took her 4 months as a disabled person from Rwanda to Kenya to travel. To segue into how I serve the refugees and advocate on their behalf. Next screen, please. East Africa is a hodgepodge of concerns, has a hodgepodge of concerns concerning refugees, which include education, teenage pregnancy, good governance, and the lack of implementation, only to name a few. I'd like to show a few pictures from inside the camp. Our programs are relevant, and we are working towards lessening the gap in gender disparities in education and socioeconomic areas. One of our programs creates safe spaces for girls, women who escape violence, early marriages, or FGM, cultural practices, to unpack their emotional burdens, regain self-value and education for some while they await resettlement, and for others, they gain empowerment skills for their livelihood. Also, we have a team that works in the mental health and psychosocial field. Once they leave their country of origin, refugees, I question, what is the psychosocial, the mental health state of the journey? Arriving at the reception center of the camp. After walking 2 to 3 months, escaping predators, what is their state of mental health? Some will arrive clutching their dead child or with the essence of the elderly that could not complete the journey, left by a tree to slowly wither away. Many Dinka males would travel with their families to the camp, but within days, they commit suicide. So within programming, we analyze for cross-cutting factors through the lens of gender sensitivity and equitable approaches for girls and women. For example, for mainstreaming a holistic approach in programming, particularly critical is the situation in Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Niger. kids in Africa work on plantations, in mines, quarries, or factories. Often they are forced to prostitute themselves. Most child laborers are exploited and have no chance of attending school because they have neither the time nor the strength to learn. Those that reach the camp enter into informal education. They say, so what I want to say, migration is gendered. With gender roles, relationships, and inequality influencing who migrates, why and how they move, and where they end up. With this in mind, without the possibility, the next screen, please. The next. Women would have a hard time to gain social economic status. The next screen, please. Without the possibilities of effective enjoyment of rights, legal status, residential permits, access to social services and justice, work permits, the future of refugee women is blocked, incapacitating them further from economic dependence. Education greatness exposes women and girls to SGBV risk, that's sexual gender-based violence. So I advocate for education for the girl child and children with disabilities, for their protection, and to put in place measures to evaluate and improve learning outcomes aimed at attaining quality and accessible education and training. Just a side note, by grade 5, only half as many girls as boys attend school in Uganda and Kenya. Only one disabled woman is educated for every 5 disabled men in East Africa. So I advocate to increase female participation in secondary and tertiary education. To remind of the previous picture about teenage pregnancy, across East Africa, many girls are excluded from school due to pregnancy, early marriages, or contribute to the livelihoods of their family. Millions of pregnant and married adolescent girls across many African countries have been denied their education because of discriminatory laws or lack of implementation of the law. For example, in Uganda, there's a working forum that advocates to uphold the national law to allow adolescent mothers to continue their schooling. Also, another law that we're rallying around, making sure that people living with disabilities have access to legal aid and inclusive education, which includes HIV and AIDS awareness in government policies. In doing this, this aims to improve the data in this population group. Education in crisis, I advocate for human rights, peace and reconciliation, that it be included in the informal education curriculum. Because the students are children from conflict. And with this education, this type of education, children in conflict will be educated with the ethos of a peace culture. You have child soldiers that have escaped and they want to be educated. I look at social and economic opportunities for women, legal and social barriers that stifle women's empowerment, and how they can access loans as well as medical care.
Dee, as you're sharing, I'm just so blown away with the intersectionality and how all of these issues overlap and can make things even more difficult for somebody who is a refugee. For those who are just joining us, we're talking with Dee Dungy today, who is a Maryknoll lay missioner serving with Jesuit Refugee Services in Nairobi, Kenya. Dee, we also have had a couple of questions come in. Thank you, Marianne, Melissa, and Tom. If others have questions, put those in the comments. We'll get to them shortly. And one of the questions, which I think, Dee, you're headed towards, Melissa has asked, how has your ministry changed since COVID?
Okay, great. I'm going into that now. Well, because the borders, I can just stop here. Because the borders are closed, the people that are in the border, the field workers and staff, we have a rotation. So every 10 days, they have to go into quarantine for 14. And then the second set of people will come. For a while, it was hard getting the supplies to the camp because 3 weeks ago, there was an AIDS worker had contacted COVID, so he's in isolation. And due to that, because they didn't want COVID to spread into the camps, they closed the camps. Kakuma, which is the camp in Kenya, the second largest camp, it's a very porous camp. So when you say close the camp, people can still get in through other means, by other means. If you're talking about Ugandan camps, Somalians leave in, go in and out, and for that reason, there is an outbreak of coronavirus in that camp. So how has it changed? And then it also affects the flights going in. There was restrictive orders on no flights, and that included AIDS flights as well. So, I mean, we had enough supplies to go around to our staff, to our field workers that do the house to house, because in Kakuma, we have 200 plus children living with disabilities. And our field workers still go up, visit the homes twice a week, and they do physiotherapy, make sure that the food is, they have enough basic needs. But dealing with children with disabilities, we have to make sure that the basic needs, the food, includes fortified food. And not only for the person with the disabilities, but actually for the whole family. You can't just feed a child. So the flights did reopen 2 weeks ago, so people are getting their food and also supplies, their hygiene and safety supplies. So we did a lot of program changes because of the COVID. So the psychosocial and the mental health department are doing that via phone. We transferred to money on cards, so we don't give out, no one comes to our centers or can come requesting any food. We just charge their phone, we pay rent, and that's all done by what's called here M-Pesa, a money card. So we've removed to cashless transaction. The women that were our top sewers have trained some other people to sew masks for the community. And we were hoping, like in Ethiopia, we were hoping to get accreditation to do masks in big quantity, because UNHCR says that we make them, they'll buy them for the whole camp. However, it's a slow process in doing that. So we're putting people to work slowly. Education is done now via phone, radios and so forth, even for, it's done through phone and awareness programs over the radio.
Dee, can I jump in with a few other questions we've had come in? Because we've got a number right now. Mary Ann is asking, what section of Nairobi are you located in?
I'm in, what section? I'm in close to Adams Arcade.
I guess Mary Ann must have some knowledge of Nairobi. And then Thomas, Thomas Rowan is asking, what is the process of getting documents to stay in a new country?
It's a long process. Once they go to the reception center, like I said, it's predicated on how they're being accepted in. For example, if they're coming in as an asylum seeker, of course, that means they have to wait for your claim to come about before they can determine if you're going to be a refugee. If a person is coming due to fleeing human trafficking, that's a harder call. They can do asylum through saying they're human trafficking, but because there's no protocol for human traffickers, some agencies are suggesting that they come in as a refugee. So seek asylum, get your thing. But what happens when they do that? The people that are seeking or running from human trafficking do not get the psychosocial needs that they should have at the reception center. As well as if if you come in as a human trafficker, so they have shelters depending on your age. Anyone that's over 18 that's involved in human trafficking, you actually go to the detention center because there's no shelters to hold the anyone over 18 years old. And then there's a waiting process. So I don't know. If I was being human trafficking, I'm in the detention center, and it takes the government 10 to 12 months before my case comes about, I just send me home. So we're trying to work to speed this process up, to have transparency of what's going on, getting regular shelters for people over 18 that's in this type of situation. So to answer your question, the process depends on how you enter.
Yeah, it sounds incredibly complicated to keep track of all of those different factors. For those that are just tuning in, we are talking with Dee Dungy, who works with Jesuit Refugee Services as a Marine missioner in Nairobi, Kenya. Remember, if you have questions, drop those in the comments. Dee, another question came from Merwin DeMello. He says, Habari Dee, can you say something about local, regional, and international advocacy role with JRS? How is that received?
I'm not really sure about that question, but I can tell you how's it received. Well, I work for the region, and I have the IO International Office as an advocacy person has a theme or something they want to push through, just like World Refugee Day that we all work on. But as a region, what IO may want may be different. For example, one is coming up that Pope Francis wants to talk about, and we sent a document on it about climate change and refugees. Well, only person that can really answer that question was the office out of South Sudan with the flooding and so forth, so we have to gather. So it's really hard, depending on what the subject is, gather people from Asia and so forth to complete some of these advocacy issues and do it as a global concern, advocacy concern.
Another question that came in is, with the U.S. cutting off and other countries limiting acceptance of refugees, what are the prospects for the refugees in East Africa and those you're encountering?
I tell you what, that's a great question. Very slow. Just to give you an example, in Kakuma, we have a shelter for girls, Safe Haven. The young ladies go there for different reasons, forced marriages, FGM, and UNHCR takes care of the cases. And so they enter some of them enter at the age of 13, 15. It takes 5 years before they can actually start thinking about being placed to a country or to another country. So if that was pre-COVID, now everything's at a standstill. We're at a standstill.
It's just heartbreaking. You make folks that have gone through so much wait even longer for just a slight change or light at the end of their tunnel.
Yeah.
So I wanted to give you a chance, Dee. You had mentioned you had put together some closing comments, so I want to give you a chance to get those closing comments in. If anybody has some last minute questions, drop those in the comments and we'll try to get to them as Dee is wrapping up.
So I want to, before you go there, I just want to talk a little bit about COVID-19. Migrants and displaced children are the heightened risk of the immediate pandemic and also secondary impacts of COVID. They often are living in cramped and crowded conditions with limited access to the WASH programs. People with disability and unaccompanied minors or separated from their families can be the hardest to reach with accurate information in the language they understand. Also, they may be prevented from accessing essential services due to legal, documentation, linguistics, or safety barriers. Furthermore, the misinformation of the spread of COVID exacerbates the xenophobia and discrimination that migrants and displaced children and their families already have. They become targets of violence and sexual targets and abuse. COVID-19 response measure framework impacts girls and boys differently in terms of their safety, their health and well-being, their family unity, and all these things just to provide basic needs. So so with that, I just want my closing comments, and for my friends that may be listening from the UK and the US, do not miss the opportunity to lead by example and call out the instances of discrimination and stigmatization against any persons, including migrants and displaced persons. Also, encourage local influencers, leaders, and young adult bloggers to speak up in support of equal justice initiative, including work that is being done at the federal level, state level about mandatory and minimum sentences. Example, like nonviolent drug crimes or legal documentations. We have to do it here. Next. Advocate state legislators to require gender and sexuality or racial impact statements be required for all criminal justice bills. These statements evaluate if a bill is created or exacerbates the before mentioned disparity should the bill become a law. So in closing, I want to say thank you for listening, and please, let's work together. And this is the final, I guess. This picture is taken in Kakuma. No, I'm sorry, not Kibera, one of the urban refugee resettlements in which I worked. And I saw it and I thought about it and I said, wow, justice. So this whole thing about justice for all with migrants, displaced people, let's walk forward and let's be positive in what we do. Thank you.
Okay, Dee, I'm not going to let you go quite yet because we've had a couple more questions come in. There's a Dee Dungy, who I'm guessing may be some relative of yours, says thank you for sharing your knowledge and asked about how can others help, which I think you hit on some of that, but if you have anything to add. And then there was one other question from Miss Anna Ross. What happens when you don't have the capacity to accommodate a refugee? So if you have a moment that you could speak to both of those, we'd appreciate it.
Oh, okay. So let's answer Ms. Dungy's comment. How can you help? Well, of course, you can help. One thing I like to say, because the young people are on the verge of all of this, if you listen to the talk earlier, there's so many youth that are in camps without jobs, without technical skills, digital skills, and they're just lost. You have so many Somalians and Ethiopians, Eritreans that are in camps, and they're looking for things to do. So how can you help? So in your local government, encourage local influencers or leaders, like I said before, and young adults to blog and speak up in support of discrimination, of socioeconomic disparities. as well as there's a link below that you can financially help us here with supplies, with health supplies and so forth. Thank you for that question. And the next question, someone was asking what happens if there's no room? There's no room in the inn? There's always room. There's always room in the camp. There's overcrowdedness, but UNHCR, the mandate is to take care of people. And that's one of the biggest issues. There's no place else that they can go. Thank you.
I feel like that's a mandate that we should all live by, just to take care of people, not just UNHCR, but if all of us could do that better, what a world it would be. So thank you, Dee, for taking the time to be with us. I really appreciate it. And from the comments I've seen coming in, others do as well. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us.
Appreciate it. Thank you all.
And we hope that all of you will join us next week here on Meet a Missioner Monday. We will be joined by Courtney Freshwater from Bolivia. She will be sharing about her various ministries, working with people living with disabilities, working with the elderly, working with the young folks. So we'll see you right back here, 11 a.m. next week. Until then, stay safe, be well, and peace be with you.
Thank you.